Welcome back. Dr. Larry Arnn joins us from Hillsdale College in Michigan. He is the president of Hillsdale College and has been since May of 2000. He's one of the four founders of the Claremont Institute, a student of the late giant of political theory, Dr. Harry Jaffa, and a colleague of the late Sir Martin Gilbert, while Sir Gilbert was writing the last 6 volumes of the official Churchill biography. He and his wife Penny have been dear friends of mine since 1989, and Hillsdale College is a sponsor of my radio show and, in fact, of every talk radio show of importance to the center-right in the country. Arnn is quite likely the most influential conservative you've never heard of in the MSNBC audience, primarily because of the work Hillsdale College does in turning out hundreds, indeed thousands of brilliant young graduates, many of whom go on to staff the halls of government and of Hillsdale's Kirby Center in the shadow of the Capitol, where constitutional conservatives in and out of government gather every day to remember what it is that makes the country work. Dr. Arnn is rather famously a never Trumper, as I am. And together, throughout the 2016 election, we stayed in the broadcast equivalent of Switzerland, never endorsing any Republican candidate, but supporting President Trump, though not uncritically, after he became the nominee and since becoming president. Welcome, Dr. Arnn. Good morning to you.
How are you?
I'm great. Larry Arnn, let's start with this question. Why did you never become a never Trumper?
Well, a lot of reasons. One is I live in the academic world, and so we are used to more time to think. So during the primary, the Trump candidacy was just really confusing, right? Where did this guy come from? Nobody like him ever got elected president of the United States. Then while I was thinking about it, I began to notice his appeal, and then in January of 2016, he wrote an article in the Reno, Nevada Gazette that I admire about the Bureau of Land Management and the rule of law. And I thought, wow, it's a handsome article, January 16th, if I remember right, 2016, in the Reno, Nevada Gazette. And I thought, I wonder what else he said about this. So I put one of my really bright young men named Jack Shannon, now getting his PhD at the London School of Economics. I said, Jack, go find everything he said about this. And he found 30 pages going back a long way that showed that Trump had some considerable understanding of the rule of law. And I'm for that. And so I just thought, wow. So I supported him.
Now, in terms of the conservative movement, of which you've been a part for as long as you've been an academic, working for years and decades, why has it not come back together around him? Why have the never-Trumpers stayed never-Trumpers, even when Mark Thiessen wrote on Friday in the Washington Post, everyone who voted for the Trump presidency, now with a second Supreme Court vacancy, is in essence justified in their vote?
Yeah, and, you know, the objections to Trump are many, and a lot have to do with his manner. And remember, he comes from nowhere, right? Nobody has ever been elected president of the United States as his first significant public service except Donald Trump. So the objections start with that. Some of them can't abide his character. I think character is a tricky thing. I read, in preparation for talking to you about this, something Winston Churchill, a very great man, and I won't compare Trump to him, compare Trump to a favorite of Churchill's, the French premier in the First World War, Georges Clemenceau, who was a fighter, I mean actually a literal fighter, a duelist. He was in libel and slander trials every 15 minutes. And he was a warrior, right? And Churchill loved that guy, although he didn't act like him. That guy was much more colorful than Donald Trump, and he was effective in a crisis. And so it looks to me like character, it's not hard to say what makes a good character. Read Aristotle's Ethics. I happen to teach that. But how character is mixed up in a person, that's different for every person. And, of course, a simply bad person or a generally bad person can't do good things. But Trump has some qualities that are not bad at all. So I don't, about that, mostly, I don't know Donald Trump. I've met him one time in my life. I watch what he does. He's a show pony. He calls attention to himself. But it seems to me that there is a direction in this administration toward the de-emphasis of the regulatory state and the decentralization of the government, and I think that those are prime constitutional undertakings.
During the campaign, you rather famously said on my radio show, fundamental things are afoot. And that has turned out to be true with the retirement of Justice Kennedy and the untimely death of Justice Scalia. The court's going to change significantly. I'm a big fan of a fellow down the street from you in Hillsdale over in Ann Arbor, Judge Ketledge, Raymond Ketledge. I'm a fan of Don Willett and of David Strauss as well, but this Ketledge fellow impresses me. Are you confident that Donald Trump is going to put another originalist on the court? And do you have a favorite?
I am confident about that. He's got his list. He's made it like in the Mikado. He's made his little list, and they really shan't be missed. No, not that part. My favorite, well, I have a bunch of students of mine who've gone off to fancy law school and did fancy clerkships and become terribly important. And they're now reached the age where they're telling their teacher what to do. And so I heard from one of them.
Happens to all of us.
You know, so you become their dog's body. But one of them is really praising Amy Barrett, and a couple of my faculty members really like her a lot. So I hope she's on the list. But the fellow from Ann Arbor and everybody on the list, that top 5 that your favorite analyst, co-favorite analyst named, I like all of those people.
They're all terrific. So let me finish up by talking. Vice President Pence came to Hillsdale College and he gave a commencement address not long after he'd been blistered by George Will, a longtime friend of yours. And I wonder about the conservative movement. I wonder whether it's going to come back together again after Donald Trump. What do you think, Larry Arnn?
It's so first of all, the conservative movement is my theory of these grand movements is in American history, social and religious movements become political movements, and then they become political parties, and then they affect the government. So the temperance and the anti-slavery movement became the Republican Party, for example. And so is the conservative movement like that? In some ways, sure, but its story is not told yet. It's a pretty new thing, the conservative movement. It's since the 1950s. And so where does it stand on the fundamental constitutional questions that prevail today? And remember, those questions are huge, and there's more than one side to them. You know, I'm for the return of the legislative power to Congress, which means you're not going to make laws in these regulatory agencies anymore. That's a very controversial thing to say and a very difficult thing to do, and it defies 50 years of history. So we're arguing about huge things like that.
It seems to me the most important issue in picking the new Supreme Court justice is the attitude of him or her towards the administrative state. Because I think you've also said the question is now whether the people will govern the government or the government govern the people. Is that, do you think, on the top of Donald Trump's list as he assesses his nominee?
Well, I have heard Don McGahn, the White House counsel, say in a public place, in an interview with me, that that was top of Donald Trump's list. And, you know, as I said, put it together. You know, there's a lot of things that Trump has said in the course of his life that I regret and he regrets. But it'd be wrong to forget, he said some simply beautiful things about the right of the people to rule, and they go back to a long time before he ever got into politics.
Last question, then.
I think he sees that.
The Russia investigation goes on. It was very contentious in the House this week. It promises to go on for months and months more. What do you think of that? And what do you think its results going to be?
Well, it's you know, it's a puzzle at the top or near the top of our constitutional system. How do you control the people who enforce the law? And we have ordinary ways of doing that for all offices except the president. And, you know, special prosecutors are common in state government history. There have been a lot of them in American history, a fair number at the federal level. But the point is, if you appoint somebody with the power to prosecute the president, then that person can potentially control the president. And that person is not elected to do that. So the way you control the president is through the impeachment process. Hearings in the House, they can have investigators and prosecutors working for them, and then they can bring charges against him before the Senate, and that is the constitutional method for controlling the president.
A great note on which to end. Dr. Arnn, thank you.